I feel like the phrase I hear the most out of any other, recently especially, in the last year or two, is like, love the process. You gotta love the process. You gotta fall in love with the process. You can't want a goal. You gotta fall in love with the process. And I hate this so much. I genuinely do, right? Because as somebody who's always worked on projects that I was deeply passionate about since a young age, I couldn't help but be like, wait, but like, I don't like half the process, but I kept doing it. And I was like, because of that, I think I just had a natural disdain towards this. Is like, no, that's not true. Like, loving the process is not a real thing, right? Of course, though, over the years, I've had to come to terms with the fact that, like, when I first heard this, I want to say I heard it for the first time when I was like 13 or whatever, right? When I first heard it, I was like, no, that's some bullshit, because I don't love the process all the time, and I keep going because I have a passion, right? So at first I was like, that was my like ostensible take about it. That was 100% just what I thought. Over the years though, as more projects come along, I've had to be like, wait, but like, I failed at that one because I ended up really not liking what I was doing. Why is that there? Like, why'd that happen? Maybe loving the process is important. And then after that, I don't really know the exact timeline here, but I suppose it's not that important. After that, I'll do another project. And I'll be like, okay, on this one, I'm only going to do the parts that I love. And then you know what I end up with? A bunch of sketches and a bunch of unrevised drafts, because I hate editing things. So then, it never gets done. And it's like, wait. So, one time, I quit because I wasn't having fun. The other time, nothing happened, because I just was messing around. So, like many things, it's like, where's that happy medium? Why am I, I've come to the terms with the fact that loving the process might not entirely be true, but there's certainly an element of it I need to take and put into my own work. Wait, sorry guys, I wanna... Okay, sorry, I've been trying to nail down this uncanny valley feeling I'm going for, and I think, I'm hoping this is the canvas we get it down, but, I was like, where's this gonna come? Why is this, like, what is this loving the process look like? How will I figure this out? And I will say, I don't think that, like many paint talks end up being at times, I think this could be a case of me just like hearing a quote and taking it at 100% face value, and then kind of learning that there's a happy medium that is more accurately intertwined in that quote, right? I think this is definitely a case of that, and I'm not gonna sit here and act like I don't have a tendency to do that, right? I understand I do. But I still think there's value to be gained in looking at why there is a happy medium to this, right? So like, what do you do then? It's like, so there's this loving the process 100% didn't work, not loving the process didn't work. And I feel like the metaphor that I've always used since then is this idea of building a garden, right? There's this common notion here right alongside this idea of loving the process that you should not care about the goal, right? It should not be about the goal, it should be about the process behind the goal. And I've also never loved that, because I was like, okay, that's sort of a paradox you're laying out, right? Because if you gotta only like the process, why would you do the process with a goal? Like, you gotta engineer this process to exist in service of a goal and make sure you love that process. Like, both these things are necessary, right? Admittedly, that's a wordy way of thinking of that, and a way that, honestly, as much as I thought back when I was in my mid-teens, I couldn't actually articulate. So, what do you do, once again, then? The metaphor I've always used is you want to build a garden, right? I think that gardening's such a fun thing because your result is to have something that is long-lasting and that you enjoy, right? Like, I feel like gardens and plants in general, I got a ton of plants in my room. My mom's got a garden. I love helping her in it. I feel like these things in general exist because they help you with, like, not even just, it's not like you love looking at a garden in terms of you're waking up every day being like, so happy I get to go look at my garden. they just help. They're just there, and they make things better, right? I think a lot of goals are like that. For an example, I have a goal of someday being a really good painter, right? This is something I've wanted since I was a kid, something that I've obviously been working towards with all of you here, right? So I'm not going to wake up every morning 3, 4, 5 years down the line when hopefully, not that I'm going to be a great painter by then, but hopefully I'm a good painter by then. I'm not going to wake up every morning being like, I'm such a good painter, let's go. I'm going to be like, man, this is me. Like, I'm happier now that I've achieved this, and I'm going to continue painting. Just like you wake up in the morning, you're not thinking about that garden, but you walk by it and it makes you feel generally better about things. And then, you know, you're like, this is a great garden. I'm going to plant another plant in it to help with this, you know? Gardening is interesting because it's not so much the garden that you're after, it's the activity of planting the plants, right? Like, that's what's fun about a garden. The goal of having this garden there is the end goal. Like, you're not planting plants with nothing in mind. You even orchestrate how the garden works to make it look nice in the end. Like, the garden is very much the end goal. Not to have a garden, but to create one. Having a garden's a given. That's going to happen. That's a state of being. That's the end result of the goal. Creating the garden's the goal, right? The process exists in service of creating the garden, but when people talk about gardens, they don't talk about, you know, as much as I'm doing right here, you'll never hear people go, man, I love the general state of peace that having a garden brings me. No, you'll hear them talk about things like, you know, oh, I'm planting a new plant today, or oh, I can use this in my garden. Maybe you gift them things related to their garden. Maybe they dress in things related to gardening. You know, it's more things like that. It's not so much this idea of like, guys, look at the general state of being I've accomplished because of my garden. The process is what's there, and that's what you're working on day by day, and that's what you should love in gardening, but there needs to be a goal there that the process is in service of. And that's why I think loving the process is great. You know, I think it's very important, of course. I'm not going to sit here and lie, but I think that loving the process inherently needs to exist in service of a goal that you want, because I think it's useless without it. I think another metaphor for this is snow, right? About a year ago, maybe a year and a half, I was sitting on my floor eating a slice of orange marmalade on toast, and I was watching the snowfall, right? This was January, early January. No, mid-January, I think, of 2024. And I remember looking at the snowfall, being like, everybody loves snow, but they don't like nobody's like, I can't wait to wake up to a sheet of snow in the morning. Actually, people do like the sheet of snow. Nobody's sitting there like, I can't wait to have snow on the road for the next week. Like, that's not what they're thinking. They're thinking, actually, we can bring this to the same exact level of the garden, right? The long-term well-being of the garden is like the snow on the floor for the week, you know? Fine, people are like, cool, it snowed, but that's not why they love it. Some people love the idea of waking up to snow the next morning, right? Very similar to the idea of having a garden being the goal. And then some people, most people, I would venture to say, love snow because they love watching it fall. And that's the process, you know? These things are equally as important, and I think they need to be, you know? I think that the idea of loving the process has become too romanticized. I think the idea of chasing a big, lofty goal has become too, not demonized, that's a big word to use for that, but too taboo, perhaps? And I think that that is bad. I think that that's a bad thing. And I don't know, that's just my 2 cents on this as somebody who's always done short-term projects and chased goals their whole life. This is just the way I've kind of thought of it, of like a certain balance that needs to exist. I think this is something that's probably a fairly personal thing. I don't actually think that, like, as much as I'm sharing this with y'all because I think it's interesting, I think it's fun, and I think it's actually, in many ways, very relevant to what we do here on Paint and Talk, because I'm trying to become a good painter with you all. I know a ton of you paint alongside me, or draw alongside me, or sculpt pottery alongside me, I've even heard, which is really cool. So I think it's relevant to what we're doing here, but I also don't think that, like, I'm not coming here to say this because I think you guys are going to be like, well, Max Dice, the guy I paint with, said this about the process, and this is what I'm going to take to heart. I'm saying it more so because I think this is sort of a compromise between one's goals and one's process that everybody needs to come to at one point or another. For some people, it'll happen naturally. You know, obviously, you guys should be able to tell by now nothing happens naturally with me. I always need to overthink it until it happens. But for some people, I think it will just happen naturally. But I do think there needs to be some sort of relationship between the process and the goals. And I think it's probably a personal one. And I think it's the only path to actually accomplishing these goals. This is the painting. I'm trying to get down an uncanny valley thing of having the head tilted and the eyes just a little bit untilted, right? And I haven't been able to nail it still. I think the eyes are too straight and the head is too far over. So, guess this episode really is all about happy mediums, because I'm missing the happy medium necessary to make this thing work. I still think it's good, though. I think this series is at worst a little bit repetitive. Probably fairly repetitive for some of you, honestly, since you're not the one painting it. But I'm having a ton of fun painting them. So at least for now, this is, I suppose, the balance between the process of making a great painting at the end of this series, hopefully, and enjoying it along the way. So hopefully this series isn't too repetitive for you all. I like the eyes on this one. There's something that is good about this. It's just not what I want it to be, 100%. So go follow on the Instagram, see this painting. It'll be up later this week, maybe even today. Who knows? You know, anybody's game on the Instagram. That's why I gotta follow to keep up with me over there. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint and Talk episode 156, 154. What episode are we on, guys? Either way, I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all. 154, I think. I think this is 154. Yeah, 154.